Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Cube Tuesdays. In today's episode, we're going to be going over some of the most recent changes that I have made to my cube. We've had a couple of new sets out recently, we've had March of the Machines Aftermath, and we've had the new Lord of the Rings sets out since I last made an update. So I'm going to go over some of the cards I'm testing from those sets and some new archetypes that I'm trying out. Right, so I've jumped over to CubeGo, but here is my list. We have highlighted the cards we're going to be talking about today. I think probably the easiest place to start is with ones that are just like fine cards that we're just testing out. So let's go to them. Right, so here are the cards I've brought in just for testing. There's no synergy things with these. We're just bringing them in to test them. So firstly, I initially missed this one out because this has actually been in my cube for about 3 months now. Reprieve is just fantastic. Run it. It's an uncommon. It goes in everything. I already know this card is good, but this is the first update. Since it's been legally released, so it should be on this list. But yeah, Reprieve is a fantastic card. We already know that. Stern Scolding is just a perfectly fine counterspell. When me and James were doing the set review, the fact that this can counter 2/3 of the creatures in my cube is quite alarming. That's quite a lot of cards and is very good for just 1 blue mana. I think the way James summed it up best is if you're a deck that would want to run Fatal Push, then you're going to run Stern Scolding. A lot of decks in my cube is quite creature-based, want to run Fatal Push, therefore I think Stern Scolding could be quite good. How long it stays in though, I'm not 100% sure because I'm not running Miscalc at the moment, and Miscalculation could technically be better because it also just, worst case scenario, it just cycles later in the game when it's been outclassed. But the fact that Stern Scolding is always a hard counter for those power and toughness 2 or less creatures, I think means it could have more play late game than something like Miscalculation. We're also testing out Urborg Scavengers. This is my first cube update since Aftermath has come out as well. This is in, I think this is a fine card. This is mainly in because we've replaced Midnight Trespasser, which has a similar effect of kind of like, it's a solid creature that nerfs the graveyard when it comes in and attacks. But that card has Daybound Nightbound, and I truly hate Daybound Nightbound and mechanic, and that was the last card in my cube that cared about it. Urborg Scavengers, I don't think is as good because that has the ward. So at a base level, I do think Graveyard Trespassers is better, but this does have a lot of potential upside. Like if you can give this like flying or double strike maybe by exiling a creature that's in your opponent's graveyard, that could be very good. Like this has way higher potential upside of Graveyard Trespasser, but the base level is not as good. But I wanted one of these effects. I wanted some kind of graveyard hate in my black 3-drop because I'm kind of doing Death and Taxes in white and black. I wanted that deck to have some kind of answer to Reanimator, to Graveyard Matter stuff. And this seemed like one of the best options available in black that is also a aggressive threat that can kill people itself and importantly does not have Daybound Nightbound. Moving over to green, we have Delighted Halfling. This is probably going to be a staple in most cubes going forward. I actually did cut Jiraga Tree Speaker for this, kind of like the green Soul Ring. My cube doesn't support the mono green deck anywhere near as much as like the Vintage Cube or something like that. A lot of powerful green decks in my cube are going to be splashing other colors. This lets you do that while also meaning they can't be countered. Delighted Halfling is a fantastic card. It'll go in a lot of cubes going forward. Then another card from Aftermath, we have Nissa Resurgent Animist. I said this previously in some of my updates. I'm currently running double fetch lands, which means that Nissa and a card like Lotus Cobra will just get better, as there's more landfall things giving you double mana in a turn with one of these out. But the fact that this also has the card advantage for elves and elementals, when my cube is full of the pitch elementals and it's got Omnath in it, this seems like a really nice, cool card for the 4/5 color deck, and I think it's going to be really cool in there. Then a card I actually missed from one that I kind of want to try out because I'm doing a bit of Gruul beatdown in here at the moment with Thrunbreaker of Silence. I'm not actually sure if this is better than 4 mana Thrun because 4 mana 4/4 could be better than a 5 mana 5/5. It just comes down earlier, you get your damage in earlier, that kind of thing. But I kind of wanted something good and aggressive in green at 5, and I think Thrun is a cool one. We're going to give it out, we'll see how it goes. All right, back to the Lord of the Rings set with 4th Aerlingus. This is a phenomenal card. We have actually already done a cube draft with these updates. And the 2 times I saw this over the 3 matches, I won both games. One game I played this on turn 3, became the Monarch super early, and just ran away with the game with way more card advantage than my opponent. And the other time I saw it, I was effectively dead. I had 1 turn to kill them. I had like 8-9 mana. Drew this off the top. It's like, oh, I win now. Phenomenal. This card is just really good at any point in the curve, and I'm really happy with it. I really like this card. I think it's really good. And then the last one we're testing, just for the sake of testing, is Aragorn, King of Gondor. This was drafted, and it did end up in James's deck at the weekend. It just seems like a really good control finisher. Like, yes, this card is phenomenal if you have a board state, but with Triomes, this is very splashable in so many decks. It just comes down, it's a 4/4 Vigilance lifelink that makes you the Monarch. You're probably in a deck that can also be holding up counter magic to protect it as well. It's just going to be a good card that will grind out value, get through for damage, and stabilize you and do everything that you want in those kind of slowy, control-y kind of decks. Hello, editing me from the future. Somehow, when I was recording this video and I was talking about new tests, I somehow missed off possibly the two most impactful cards from the set. Orcish Bowmasters and the One Ring. So let's talk about them both now. So the One Ring first, this is just a fantastic bit of card draw. The engine that this does is really, really strong. It's already been drafted and already been played, and it's looking like it'll do some decent work. From what I've seen so far, you really want to be ramping this out. Like, playing this on turn 4 is not fantastic, but getting this down on like turn preferably 2, but 3 is also fine. It's just going to be really good. But yeah, One Ring, great card. Love that it's in there. Orcish Bowmasters, again, every time I talk about this, I just say it's a very silly card. The fact that you just get your value out of this just straight away, it comes in with flash, it pings a creature, it can ping a mana dork, something like that. You get this and your army token is just phenomenal. As a baseline for a card, that is just very, very strong. And then in certain matchups where your opponent is drawing cards, if they're doing cantrips, if they're cycling or something like that, or if you're in the wheel deck where you're drawing a load of cards with wheels or time twisters, that kind of stuff, it pings them for a bunch and you make a massive orc army as well. Very strong card, very versatile, love it. There isn't much more that needs to be said. Just, it's a very good card. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled program. All right, let's reset the filters. Let's go on to what I'm doing in Boris now. So let's go to Boris Legends first. So there's been a few cards printed recently that really make me want to do something interesting with Boris. Like, the one that kind of really kicked it off for me is Eowyn Fearless Knight. So this is 2 red and a white for a 3/4 legendary creature human knight with haste. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature and opponent controls with greater power. Legendary creatures you control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. So in Draft and in Magic generally, most decks will share colors with each other. Basically what Eowyn does is it comes down, takes out your opponent's biggest threat, and then in theory makes like 2/3 of your board unblockable. That's a very solid way of winning a game of Magic. So what I've done is I have added a bunch of legendaries into Boris colors. We already had some in here, like we were already running things like Lauren of the Third Path, Adeline, Thalia, Skrelv, and Kithian. Obviously, Ragavan goes in a lot of cubes nowadays. Felden is a great aggressive card. Lelia, Najeela, and Squee are all phenomenal. But to kind of add to this, I brought in things like Isimaru. It's a 1-mana 2/2 that is a legend. We love that. Yoshimaru, Ever Faithful, the one that grows whenever you play another legendary permanent. This one could be a bit of a push. I do agree with this. We're testing it. We're seeing how it goes. I will kind of, at some point, I will do a full video breaking down this archetype, but this is kind of just my initial build of it. I also wanted to try out Frodo Determined Hero. This is the one that I think my playgroup was least happy with because I did cut a Donto Vanguard for this. I do agree it is not as good as a Donto Vanguard, but the potential synergies does make it quite interesting. We then have Samwise as well, which is not just a mono white card. I think this could be quite good in kind of like decks with fetch lands, decks with strip mine, doing more things with that return the permanent back to your hand, just getting good value out of it. And then in red, I brought in Zergo and Kari Zev. I think Kari Zev is going to be fantastic in this legendary deck because it is a creature that repeatedly is making you more legendaries. Like if I'm honest, going turn 1 Yoshimaru, going turn 2 Kari Zev, on turn 3 you attack with this and you make a legendary monkey. That means Yoshimaru is attacking as a 3/3 on turn 3. That's pretty good, as well as Kari Zev. And also, you can then play another hasty creature on turn 3 as well. That is a lot of damage. I don't hate that. I did also bring in Merry as another kind of signposty card that kind of helps this deck out. Effectively, this is in here because it's Boris for a 2/2 with haste. So when you attack with another legendary creature, you draw a card. The equipped ability won't come up that often, although I have added Eater of Virtue. I brought this in over Bone Splitter. They're effectively the same card. It's just this is legendary, so will trigger Yoshimaru, for example. This is kind of my first pass at kind of what a rough deck would look like. Obviously, this is only 19 cards. There is still the rest of my red and my white section that you can take from for this. There's your burn spells, there's your Path to Exiles, there's all that kind of stuff as well. Specifically for this legendary deck, I do think I need Flowering of the White Tree. I just haven't picked one up yet. That's the white card that gives your legendary creatures +2/+1 and ward, I think, 1. And just gives all your other creatures +1/+1. So it's 1 cheaper for a Glorious Anthem anyway. But if you have a load of legendaries, it can do a ton of work. Like that, I think, could be quite strong, specifically in this build. I'm not sure how deep I'm going on this archetype yet. I don't know if like it wants Mox Amber, for example. And I definitely mentioned that to my playgroup, and they're like, okay, you're putting in Mox Amber for Boris, but it's just going to end up in the deck with planeswalkers and good legendary spells, that kind of thing. So that's what we've brought in for Boris. I won't kind of go break down every card I have cut, but effectively I have cut good, efficient mono white and mono red cards to make this work. That means that mono white and mono red have technically been powered down in my cube. I personally don't think that is the end of the world, because they are probably some of the two most consistent and winningest decks when they come together. But it is something I will keep an eye on. If those two decks just fall off completely from this, like they're not making the finals or they're not winning consistently, then it is something I will need to look at in the future and maybe kind of find another kind of like valve to tweak them to kind of make them a bit better. All right, let's go back. What should we talk about next? Right, let's talk about Flash. So this is another one that I'm not 100% sure of yet, but I do think is quite cool. This deck is kind of based in Simic, but it can splash other colors for other cool instants or other creatures with Flash. What we're trying to do is basically play on our opponent's turns. Our creatures have Flash, so we're always leaving up mana to see what they're doing. We can react fantastically to them. So like we can hold up counter magic to see what they're doing. If they don't play anything, we can flash in a creature that they can then swing in on the next turn. We're going to be very reactive. It's kind of tempo-y. It's kind of what I'm going for. And also there's just plenty of flash creatures in here already, like things like Fairy Mastermind, Snapcaster Mage, Brazen Borrower, Deceiver Exarch, Hull Breacher, Pestamite. Again, Kiki Jiki Twin is in here, so that's why these cards are in here. Like Vendilion Click, like Torrential Gearhulk, like Endurance, Loot Tree, Icefang Coatl, were already in here. So basically what I've done is kind of topped up that section with a few other cool creatures, mainly in green if I'm honest with you. So Wildborn Preserver is a cool flash creature that can kind of grow and get bigger. It can come down early. It can eat an attacker, something like that. Nightpack Ambusher is another really cool card. It's a 4-mana 4/4. Like, this is really good in this flash deck, but also it's a 4-mana 4/4 that gets bigger. It will go in the Gruul Stompy deck as well if needed. It has power and toughness. It'll be fine. So the other cards I've added as well is Wilderness Reclamation and Prophet of Kruphix. These basically untap your land so you have them on your opponent's turn. So why these are really, really strong, especially in this deck, is with these, you can play like your non-flash creatures on your turn. I mean, Prophet of Kruphix gives everything flash, but hooray, that's great for you. But like, you can play your sorcery speed spells on your turn, then all your lands untapped, and then you can play your flash spells or your counter spells or your other instants on your opponent's turns. There's also some cool mana things you can do with Wilderness Reclamation where you can kind of tap them in response to this, and then they'll untap, and then you can tap them again, you basically get double mana. So that's where you have like big instants with things like Mystic Confluence, Sublime Epiphany, Nexus of Fate, that was the one in Standard, I think, Dig Through Time, and like Chord of Calling. These are all very powerful things you can do with a card like Wilderness Reclamation. Prophet of Kruphix only does it on your opponent's turn, so you can't do the battery thing, but you can still get double mana on both turns. I am aware that it is 5 mana for a 2/3, but you get that mana back on your next turn, so it's not the end of the world. If you can follow this up with another spell, like literally any spell, then it's kind of already paid for itself. The other card I also added was Bounding Krasis. This is kind of me attempting to do like a little pod chain. I did also add Prime Speaker Vannifar. That one I don't think is good enough. I don't think is going to get there. I might leave it in for a bit longer, or maybe try and tweak it, because I do like the idea of having pod being supported in the cube, and Bounding Krasis does work in that pod chain. So it's either I kind of need to commit more to it, make the pod chain actually work, so you can kind of go 2, 3, 4, 5 with these untappers to kind of, so you can really kind of go up your pod chain super quickly and finish with like an Elishnorn or something like that. Or I need to accept that it's maybe not there for cube, and just pod can be a cool thing people can do, but it can't be a whole deck. That's something that I need to take away and think about. But like the main thing with this is Simic Flash is here. I'm not sure yet how I can change and adjust it. It just needs some more reps. I need to do some more cube and see where it ends up, basically. But I think it's a cool deck. I think people will like it as well. The other thing as well is I didn't have to actually cut too many like cards I was super going to miss to make this work. Like most of the flash creatures were already in here. Like Wildborn Preserver is a perfectly fine aggressive creature. Green is an aggressive color in my cube. Same with Nightpack Ambusher. Like I guess cutting Hydroid Krasis for Prophet of Kruphix on raw power level, Hydroid Krasis is a really cool card. It's very, very strong. But with my guild sections, I'm fine putting something synergistic and cool in them, basically. All right, let's go back to the list and go over the last update, the last archetype change that I made, something new that I'm testing, and it is Top of the Deck Library Matters. All right, so this is the cards that I've kind of put in as a little package for Top of the Deck Matters. What is this trying to do? So there's 2 types of cards in here. Basically, you have cards like Scroll Rack, Sensei's Divining Top, Vampiric Tutor, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Brainstorm, Mystical Tutor. These are all good at putting things on top of your library. So Vampiric Tutor, Mystical Tutor, they tutor them up. Like things like Scroll Rack, Sensei's Divining Top, Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Brainstorm, they let you manipulate cards from your hand and put them on top of your library. When you combine them with basically miracle things, so Triumph of St. Catherine, it has Miracle, Entreat the Angels, Terminus, Temporal Mastery. These are all powerful spells that are greatly reduced if they are on the top of your library. You have to cast it straight away when you draw it, but the idea is that you can control when you do that with the cards like Sensei's Divining Top and Scroll Rack and Jace, these kind of things. You get a super powerful effect really cheaply. So 2 mana to take an extra turn. You've time walked, well done. But we also have some other cool cards that aren't miracles that has made this a bit more interesting to me. So Vesuvian Drifter is a new one. This is 2 in a blue for a 2/4 flyer that lets you look at the top of your library at any time. And then at the beginning of each combat, you may reveal a card on the top of your library. If you reveal a creature card this way, Vesuvian Drifter becomes a copy of that card until end of turn, except it has flying. So I guess the idea is you have this in play on turn 3, you go to swing with it on turn 4, then with a Vampiric Tutor or a Top or a Scroll Rack, you put something massive on top of your library. When it attacks, it becomes your big Titan, it becomes your Eldrazi. You swing through with it, you get those effects of it. It's kind of another way of doing Reanimator. It's kind of another way of doing Show and Tell, actually, which is what I quite like about it. We then also have God Eternal Kefnet. This has been in for a while. This was actually the first infinite combo in my cube, was God Eternal Kefnet, Jace the Mind Sculptor, and an extra turn spell. Because basically with God Eternal Kefnet, you put the extra turn spell on top of your library. God Eternal Kefnet lets you cast a reduced mana copy of that spell. Then you just repeatedly put the extra turn spell back on top of your library with Jace or with Scroll Rack. You're always casting the copy of the extra turn spell every turn and then putting the original back on top, so you effectively take infinite turns. It's a 3-card combo, but it is quite cool and it's something a little bit different. So what's nice about this deck is that it doesn't take up too many cards. Like, all these cards are kind of powerful by themselves. I will admit, these aren't as strong by themselves. Like, these do need some setup, but the effects are very strong when they happen naturally in a game. Basically, this is a little sprinkling on top of your Esper control deck, that kind of thing. Again, this is something I wanted to test for a while. We've had miracle cards for a while. Triumph of St. Catherine from the Warhammer sets lets you bring it on creatures that I do quite like. There are some more in white, and there's another one in white-black that I could test out. We'll kind of see how it goes. We'll see what the playgroup like it, because there is definitely an element with some of these extra turns, with some of these miracles, is that they can be feel bad. Like, you can have a very even, cool game of Magic, and then the opponent rips the Entreat of Angels off the top. They've done nothing apart from, I guess, draft it and put it in their deck, which is something to consider. But in terms of gamed actions, they've done nothing to set it up. They just draw it, play it, and then they can kind of steamroll the game from there. That is definitely a real thing with miracles, and it could be a bit of a feel bad. But it's something I want to test, and we'll see how it goes. We're still very early days with this. If it's something that does quite well and people like it, then I will do a video on it and kind of break it down in a bit more detail. So I think that is the bulk of all the updates. Again, we're trying out some new cards. I'm pretty happy with this. Basically, what I've been trying to do is a combination of test new cards and try and fix archetypes that I think aren't fully there. The next one I'm going to be looking at is probably like the 4 or 5 color Omnathi lands deck. It's a really cool deck, but it definitely has some issues. Like, it's not been putting up numbers recently, and basically I need to try and work out why that is and what I can do to support that. The main thing I kind of got so far is just there's so many, like, all the cool cards that are green 3s. So we have Course of Crufix, we have Nissa, we have Roundhip Excavator, we have Tireless Provisioner, we have Tireless Tracker. That's a lot of cards just in green 3s. I think I need to probably kind of spread out a little bit. But if anyone has any ideas for that, do let me know down in the comments. And and also let me know what you think of the changes. Have you tried any of these new cards? Have you tried any of these archetypes that I'm currently testing? That would be really cool to hear. But anyway, until next time, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye. What you doing, little one? You want to say hello, darling? You want to say hello? Come here. Where are you going? Goodbye.